Hello everybody, how are you going? And welcome to horrifying things that scientists found when they drained Niagara Falls, which sounds ridiculous. I never would have thought you could even do that in the first place, but let's see what happened and what they found.
In 1969, the American Army Corps of Engineers did something incredible. They drained Niagara Falls. When the water slowed to a trickle and the rocks that had been hidden underwater for thousands of years could be seen, the engineers found something both shocking and horrifying. Lying on the riverbed were millions of coins. As they explored the exposed bedrock further, they stumbled across human remains. Now engineers want to drain the falls once again, and what they might find could shock the world. In the coming years, the waters on the American side of Niagara Falls will be diverted to the Canadian side, and the rock bed will be exposed.
Whoa, hang on a second. He just needs to slow down because he's just talking as though things are just normal. Like you just divert an entire river. All of Niagara Falls, you just go, nah, not on that side, mate. Just go on that side. Hang on. That's billions of liters, depending on how long this is going to be in for. I can only imagine it's going to be billions, even trillions and gazillions of liters. And so how do you even go about doing that in the first place? Like, you have to be building all of these gated dams? Is that already a thing that exists? And if it isn't, then how do you build it while you have the rapids flowing the entire time? That's crazy. And also, how far upstream? I mean, maybe for the upstream, I don't know how far it actually splits, but considering it's coming from the north, I can't imagine it's very far. But I also just need to come back to the fact that they've already done this, as the title suggests, but in 1969, not recently. And I guess, well, not super recently. It wasn't the 1800s, but it's not like it was 2012 when they did it. I feel as though I would have heard about more of it. And I'm surprised that I've never heard about that at all. In the 70s, how much is going to truly have changed? Or actually, is it the other side? Did they do the American side and now they're doing the Canadian side, or the other way around? Whatever it is, that's what I can only imagine is going to be happening. Because to do it after thousands and thousands of years and you're going, okay, I saw what I saw, and then 50 years later, I can't imagine you're going to find anything besides a few GoPros and phones. I mean, everything else definitely makes sense, just all the gold and all the coins and then even skeletons and remains and everything like that. Totally, given the breadth of history, even if it's, I don't know, 3,000 years old, that skeleton. I don't know how long it's been there. Probably not that long given erosion and things, but if it's kind of protected, maybe it's been newer, and I'm sure that there's probably been some dodgy dealings around that entire place regardless. Let alone all the people that just choose to go over in barrels and all sorts of contraptions. So yeah, nothing that they've mentioned so far has been surprising, but I can only imagine there was some just gems, both literally and figuratively.
In 1969, researchers needed to explore the riverbed and examine the walls of the river to identify points of erosion and better understand the rock composition of the area. This time around, engineers are going to take the opportunity of a drained Niagara Falls to repair bridges that have been in use for over a century. There are two parts to this story. The first has to do with the amazing feat of engineering used to drain a waterfall that dumps thousands of gallons of water every second into the river below. The second has to do with the mysterious objects found under the water of Niagara Falls once it was drained. The official term for this process is dewatering. The first and only time thus far that Niagara Falls had been dewatered was on June 13, 1969, a month before Apollo 11 landed on the moon.
There were some interesting priorities going on around that time, isn't there? Between going to the moon and dewatering Niagara Falls. I mean, there's kind of like this cold thing across the other side of the world, perhaps, but nah, let's not worry about that. Let's spend probably, I don't know, $2 billion or something dewatering a natural landmark. What are people doing? I mean, it's cool that they could even do it, but probably devastating to some degree, especially given that even by today's standards, often biological and ecological protection isn't exactly prioritized maybe as much as it should, and so I can only imagine that in 1969 and leading up to that, with a few other things on their mind, I wonder what really happened there.
People flocked to Niagara Falls from around the country to see the naked riverbed. To be clear, there are three main waterfalls in the area. The largest sits on the Canadian side of the border and is known as Horseshoe Falls. This part of Niagara Falls has never been dewatered and probably never will be, as it unleashes an enormous amount of water every second. Here, the water drops 165 feet and accounts for 85% of the river's flow. The falls on the American side are much smaller and therefore easier to divert water from. These waterfalls are named American Falls and Bridal Veil Falls. When these two waterfalls were stopped in 1969, the rock faces stood between 70 and 100 feet tall. It was this image that thousands of people came to see. Pictures were snapped and headlines were made.
I just need to be having a look at that a little bit more because perhaps I've seen it, but also perhaps not. I feel as though I would have remembered seeing something like this a little bit more. It's such a icon that is such then a different icon. It's the same icon, just missing its main ingredient. It's so weird to go, okay, Niagara Falls is actually falls, which I've never really thought about, the fact that yes, it is multiple waterfalls. That's why it's called falls. And so you have Horseshoe Falls, which is what I was thinking that they dammed. And I was going, how do you possibly deal with that much water? I don't understand how you could ever deal and divert and change and, I don't know, route around. What is it, like 1 billion liters a second? I have no idea. But then to be doing this one makes a lot more sense. I mean, it looks like it's maybe 50 meters across. I'm sure I could get a more accurate measurement if I just even went on Google Maps and measured it, but I also believe that I'm seeing maybe, is that the dam up the back there where they've diverted it towards Horseshoe Falls instead? Oh, I don't know. I almost just, I need to go onto Google Maps. Here we go. Let's just have a little look-see and see what are they talking about and where's Horseshoe Falls. Is that, okay, well, it's even difficult to see because you don't get the 3D nature of it, but I'm now confused. Is it, wait, so the river flows... Wait, now I'm even more confused. How is it on the USA side? Oh, okay, it's going that way. I would have thought it was coming down, but it actually goes up. Regardless, though, you can just very clearly see the kind of volume and pressure that this system is outlaying. Like, you've got an ocean behind a singular waterfall, bar a couple, I'm sure. And so for it all to be going down Horseshoe, which is, what, 270 meters or something? Wow. That's a good guess, or maybe it's just subconscious memory. Regardless, let's just see, these guys at the mouth is quite wide still, but over where they've actually dammed it is closer to, let's say, wow, still 120 meters across. That is further than I thought, and especially down here. However, looking at this, it definitely also does make sense that they need to be doing, to some degree, periodic maintenance of these bridges to get to whatever this island's called, because I removed the labels of it, which is fine too. But man, that is a serious amount of water control. How do you possibly... Did they just divert it down here? And then what is that? Is that a little aqueduct thing? Where do you go? What's this? Is this like water supply? That's a dam itself? I don't even know what's going on anymore. Oh, is that hydroelectric? Is almost what I think that, yeah, because look at that substation, right? So that's controlled water. Interesting.
The engineers didn't so much stop the flow of water as divert it. They built a temporary 600-foot dam across the Niagara River, which diverted 60,000 gallons of water every second toward Horseshoe Falls. This temporarily increased the already enormous amount of water flowing over the falls, making it an even more spectacular sight to behold. When the water was drained, the engineers were amazed by how many coins were lying on the riverbed. They were collected, but records do not indicate where the money actually ended up. Even more surprising were the two sets of human remains that were recovered during this time. One belonged to a man, another a woman. Everybody from a known accident at the falls had been recovered, so authorities could only scratch their heads and wonder who these two sets of remains belonged to.
Oh, and I would love to know how old they were, because, I mean, in this video, they were complete skeletons, but were they complete skeletons? Were they, even if they were 300 years old, would they have survived? Are they in a more, like I said, protected area? So many different things like that, I'm sure, come into it. But, oh, you just gotta know some stuff is going on. Surely at that point, you're just going, yeah, if we've found everyone and we've still got more, and maybe there's some things around their feet or something, I don't know, whatever it is, it's just not exactly explainable by general kind of barrel situations. The other one that I do love is the fact that no one knows where the coins went. What, some contractor came in and went, oh, we'll manage the cleanup for you, don't worry. We'll take every little bit of evidence off your hands, and look at that, just straight away in the truck, never to be seen again. Probably, like I said, gold coins, like actual gold coins, silver coins, everything in between, dimes, pennies, I don't even know what. That is a lot of water. I mean, I don't believe it's 1 billion. That should be more like, what, 2.5 million or so gallons per second, or liters per second. Oh, actually, look at that. It says it right there. 3,160 tons of water flow over Niagara Falls every second, and so 3.16 million liters of water flow over Niagara Falls or Horseshoe Falls, because I'm seeing both listed there. Regardless, it's a lot.
Although deaths at Niagara Falls were nothing new, especially when people had been making bad decisions and doing crazy things near the landmark since the 1800s. On July 19, 1853, Joseph Avery and 2 other men had been working off the shore of Goat Island. The men had been drinking and made some questionable decisions when it came time to return to the mainland. Avery and the other 2 workers hopped into a rowboat and started to drunkenly paddle back to the mainland. Only moments after pushing it off into the turbulent waters, the boat capsized, throwing the men into the raging river. Avery watched in horror as his 2 friends were dragged toward the American Falls and disappeared over the edge. Avery was able to grab onto a thicket of tree roots and held on for dear life as his friends plummeted to their deaths. 18 hours went by before any help arrived. When someone discovered that there was a man hanging onto tree roots in the middle of Niagara River, they sent for help. A rescue team was dispatched and made their way across the river to rescue Avery, but the current was too strong and the rescue team couldn't reach him without being swept over the side of the falls. Then someone had—
Wait, before he goes any further, I feel as though this is a thing that should have been addressed. Firstly, did I read that right, that this was the 1800s? Yeah, 1853 is what they just mentioned, and so, of course there's going to be rowboats for this kind of scale of operation, but then, if they got swept over, how is the rescue team ever going to do anything? That's what I really want to know. They went, yeah, we'll tackle this, I don't know how we'll tackle this, and they clearly didn't. And speaking of didn't though, the fact that that guy didn't let go for 18 hours, I wonder if he was kind of perched where he wasn't just in the rapids the whole time, because even if your life depended on it, could you hold on against those kind of tides for 18 hours? I just don't think you could do it. And then on top of everything else, the thing that then confuses me the most is I swear that I've seen people like at the edge of the falls in like a little pooly bit where you're apparently safe and you can just hop in and there's no current. The water fills up this, 2-meter deep spa-sized area and you're fine. And you can look over the edge, which is utterly absurd in its own, that you can be that close and not just immediately dispatched over the edge. But where is that one? Is that America Falls? Is that... I can't imagine it's Horseshoe Falls, but where is it? What was the other one? Vale Falls, was it?
Then someone had an idea. They tethered a boat to Goat Island and slowly released rope so they could control their descent down the river. They reached Avery, who was desperate to get out of the water by any means necessary. He was clearly only moments away from losing his grip and going over the falls. The boat reached Avery, but as he scrambled to climb in, the turbulence caused the entire vessel to capsize. Avery was thrown back into the raging water, swept downriver, and plunged over the falls. Even after—
I probably should have let it go the first time, but that is tragic. 18 hours. 18 hours and then just let down like that. Let down very abruptly. That is devastating. Like he was saying, sure, I can't say this and do that. I'm sure if the boat wasn't there, he probably could have held on for a little bit longer. 18 hours in, I can't imagine you just suddenly give way. But, man, what happened? Why did the boat get all the way there and then just go, nah, not today? That's ruthless by the falls. They're really just taking no prisoners.
Even after struggling to survive all night and almost an entire day, Joseph Avery died on the American side of Niagara Falls. After his death, the rock that he clung to was given the name Avery's Rock. But not everyone who goes over the falls dies. In fact, some people chose to go over Niagara Falls for some pretty crazy reasons. On October 24, 1901, Annie Edson Taylor became the first person to go over the falls in a wooden barrel and survive. The emphasis here is that she was the first person to go over Niagara Falls in a wooden barrel and live, because 2 days before Annie set her cat over the waterfall to see if it would survive. The cat lived, which...
What are people thinking with this waterfall? It, as we've just heard, takes no prisoners, doesn't care for anything, and nor should it. It's an extremely uncontrollable, powerful force of nature that's just doing its thing. Why send things like a poor cat over a barrel? Who thought that was going to be a good idea? They did specify that was the first one that survived, and then she was the first person to survive. I can only imagine that generally means that she wasn't the first person to attempt it. There were plenty of people that attempted it for who knows what reason. Maybe someone knows and they just went, yes, it was to get the gold coins at the bottom instead of adding to them. But just who dreams up these ideas going, yeah, out of everything, I think a barrel will do. That even though it might have a little bit of pressure on the wine and the fermenting process, it's not, a pillow or anything that would remotely be deemed structurally sound enough to pass a safety qualification for that kind of thing. I don't think you could even make anything that would possibly be going, yeah, we can actually tick off 100% survival. It's just not happening. You're a waterfall from 30 meters.
The cat lived, which convinced Annie that she would as well. Annie was a school teacher who was struggling to make ends meet like most teachers. She came up with a foolproof plan to become famous, which would inevitably make her rich. On her 63rd birthday, Annie climbed inside a wooden barrel and went over Niagara Falls while hundreds of people looked on. The wooden barrel had an air hole drilled in it so she could still breathe while inside. Annie was sealed in and the barrel was sent over the river. People watched as the barrel bobbed up and down in the swiftly moving water. Then Annie and the barrel disappeared over the falls. It landed in the white water with a thunk. When the barrel was recovered, Annie was found alive with a few bumps and bruises, but otherwise physically unharmed. However, her plan was shattered when she wasn't swarmed by fans. Annie received almost no proceeds from her stunt, and when she passed away from natural causes, her funeral had to be paid for by public donations.
Whoa. It doesn't always pay, does it? Things in life are not always worth it, and that is definitely one we can go, no, I am not risking it all, so to say, for that. Like, why? Why did you ever think that that was your ticket? I mean, I guess people do crazy things in desperate situations, and she sounded like she was in a desperate situation, so there's so many things that go along with that, but that is another tragic story. Like, the fact that she lived, and she lived to tell the tale, and no one cared. They're just like, yeah, you stupid person, what are you doing? We watched you do it, and you had an air hole, but it was watertight, so I don't get that. And also, what happens if the barrel flips around and then the air hole is suddenly not an air hole, it's a water hole? Then I'm sure you wouldn't have been in the greatest of situations. There were so many things that could go wrong in that, and even just the water impact. You're sure the cat survived, but that could just be the exact way that the barrel landed. There are so many factors. But I guess she did her one trial run, maybe a few more just empty barrels, and the barrels didn't completely disintegrate, and so that was her ticket out of there. And it just didn't work out as planned.
But the fact remains that Annie Edson Taylor was and will always be the first person to ever survive going over Niagara Falls in a barrel. And that brings us back to the dewatering of Niagara Falls. Joseph Avery was not the last person to be tragically swept over the falls, and not everyone was as lucky as Annie Edson Taylor when trying daredevil stunts at Niagara Falls. Therefore, it wasn't surprising that when water was diverted from the American side of the falls, bodies were found. The first body belonged to a female. She had decomposed and only her bones remained. The entire research project was halted as investigative teams were brought in to preserve the remains and identify who they belonged to. The team removed the skeleton and took it back to the lab for analysis. The recovery of the remains was a success, but the identification of who they belonged to was not. To this day, we still don't know whose bones were found when the American side of Niagara Falls was drained.
I mean, once again, I'll say it, I want to know how old that skeleton is, because if you are literally looking over a even multi-decade period, how are you possibly going to be able to figure it out? I mean, sure, you might go, okay, we lost this person here, and it's 25 years and 31 days, and you go, oh, it just happens to line up perfectly. But it's never going to do that. What are you ever expecting? I mean, you're not going to have dental records. I mean, all those kind of things. How well can they really work after you've been hammered by a waterfall for however long? I mean, I do now want to know, is it a salt or a freshwater? I can only imagine that given it's coming from the lakes that it would be a freshwater, and then so that probably wouldn't preserve it as well, but the constant running of water is also not going to allow any extra mold contaminants or anything like that just to build up and even decompose even further. But man, the fact that they even just halted the entire thing and went, okay, let's actually deal with this situation. It may be very well a lost cause, but we do have to deal with the situation at hand because it could lead to some answers. It also probably won't lead to some answers, but we have to take that chance, and that's fair enough as well.
But this isn't the most gruesome story to come out of the draining of Niagara Falls in 1969. When the water stopped flowing and the research teams began their work, something horrifying happened. As researchers and engineers worked in the dried riverbed and people flocked from around the country to see a dry waterfall, a man walked up to the newly exposed rock face and fell. Several witnesses saw the man fall and land somewhere in the rocks below. Rescue teams were sent to find the man. It took several days, but eventually the body was recovered and work could once again resume on the dried riverbed of Niagara Falls. There were also...
What? How does it take days to find him? Just send... It's 1960s. Send a helicopter up to go, oh, there he is. That's surely the extent of it, as well as all the rope access crews and everything else. So especially when you have witnesses that could at least narrow it down. I mean, we already measured it before. It's maybe 200 to 350 meters. He's not going to create an entire landslide behind him. How do they get lost for multiple days? What? That makes no sense to me whatsoever. Just pulled up another random photo that I went, okay, that looks interesting, but really, like, you're going, okay, was it here? Was it there? Was it there? Like, narrow it down a little bit, and even if it doesn't, the fact that it's taking days, there's a lot of little bits, but you've got an entire search team around it. It just doesn't sound that hard, but clearly it is, and I guess that is just part of the process of working in these areas. They are completely alien areas. No one is, well, I can't imagine anyone has ever seen that previously. Like, in all of human history, I can't imagine that that has ever happened, where Niagara Falls was actually a thing after all the glaciers melted and all those kind of things where the water diverted. After any of that, since then, it's just been flowing. There's no way it could have been drained. There's no tree that would have fallen down and blocked that much water. So the fact that that was a first in human history, you know, we don't have that many firsts in terms of people being places, unless sea levels completely change or there's a massive landslide and things like that. But there just isn't that many places where you could say, yes, truly I can guarantee that no feet have ever touched this ground right here, you know, through all Aboriginal history of any continent, country, and then just onwards from there. It's incredible that that is one of very few places in the world I reckon you could actually say that. And the workers that actually went on there, you go, I've been there, and now look at it.
There were also less gruesome things found when the water was diverted from American and Bridevale Falls in 1969. Millions and millions of coins were uncovered by the research teams and brought out of the riverbed. These coins were mainly from the United States and Canada, but other currencies were also retrieved. Now that there are plans in place to drain the American side of Niagara Falls once again, many people are wondering what objects will be uncovered under its waters. It's been over 50 years since it was last drained, and during that time we've developed cell phones, drones, and cameras. All of these objects will likely be found wedged in the rocks of Niagara riverbed, along with more coins. Although there are no known missing bodies from people who have gone over the falls, it's still within the realm of possibility that human remains could be found. Accidents happen all the time, and people might be traveling alone when they disappeared. Only time will tell if more human remains will need to be exhumed from the riverbed of Niagara Falls, and who knows what other objects might be found once the waters of Niagara cease to flow.
That truly is the thing. It's like you're going, okay, we expect so-and-so and so-and-so things to be there, like they said, coins and phones and cameras and drones and everything else. I mean, the fact that, it would be interesting to recover some of the footage from the GoPros, let's say, because if they're watertight enough, I wonder, depending on how long they've been there, are the SD cards still intact? Because often SD cards will also impact, shock, water, everything proof as well. And so if the camera just kept rolling until it ran out of footage and then it just turned off, the footage should actually still be on there, and so if you could actually just retrieve all that, that would be interesting as well. But then, like they said, it is all the unknown things, just people going missing, random other objects like UFOs, if you want to call them that. What it would be, unidentified floating objects, or I guess realistically they didn't float for very long, maybe a little bit, and then they just, crashed to the bottom. And I do wonder, did they find the majority of it before or after the waterfall? Because there's a big mouth of a waterfall where it seemingly gets quite shallow in comparison, and then it just goes over the edge. And so I'd love to know how that works, because you've got two bridges, people losing coins and phones and everything off them. We're going towards the actual waterfall itself. It's either going to be just swept away or just living right buried in the rocks there. And so, I wonder if they're actually going to do it and when they're going to do it. This was only made last year, and so there's plenty of time that it can still be done. But it would be an interesting sight to behold. Just going, it's so disconnected. Like, it's just a dried riverbed as though it's thousands or millions of years old. But no, that dam breaks down the end there, and you are gone like the rest of them.